Hi, everybody. This is Tammy Brunk. I wanted to give just a little bit of an overview of what we are moving into in 2023. And I'm speaking today at the Aquarius new moon and the Chinese New Year, Year of the Water Rabbit. And it just feels like the absolute most appropriate time to really be speaking into the new energies because as of today, as we move into this new moon portal, we truly are stepping into this powerful new year and moving forward in a big way. So let me get started. Got a little bit of a PowerPoint just to kind of anchor the energies, so we've got it's a lot in terms of, there are many layers to what's happening. And so I want to be sure that I've got something that can kind of be an anchor point. So here we go. All right. So I like to start with the kind of the bigger theme as I see and feel it. And every year at the beginning of the year, I have, because the main way that I bring in information is through I'd be more of a clairvoyant through vision. And so just as the new year is coming in, I almost always have some kind of a really vivid vision. This year, actually, interestingly, I also was feeling it even more so in my body, but I had both. And and what it was really was the sensation of wings and the feeling of that, and then literally seeing us emerging. Now, I understand in any given year, of course, there are as many experiences that we can have as there are humans on the planet, and of course, other beings as well. So just honoring even the idea of one flavor that guides the year is kind of, it's a frame. But what it feels like to me is that it's an invitation that is going to speak to many, many people about what is potential for this year. That is it's a frequency, and and again, an invitation that can support us in recognizing the deeper, just the bigger themes and the bigger energies that are coming through. So this is what I keep seeing, feeling, hearing for 2023 is that it is a year of emergence after so many of us have been, for various reasons, in more phases of contraction um, or more of that inward kind of movement. So it's been said many times, but I don't think it can be said too many times that we've been in the chrysalis collectively. And as a human species, we've been in this big death birth portal. And so we are beginning to see the kind of cracks in that chrysalis as the light's coming in. We're beginning to emerge. And again, we're beginning to feel our wings. And that's a sensation, a feeling that I've been getting now for a little while. Um, and again, we're all in different phases. And so as even a humanity, as a collective, we've got all the flavors and we're moving in and out of them. We're also, this year, there's just a lot of weaving. So one of the other themes is that it's like become friendly with change. Learn to become friendly with change. And I think sometimes I've heard spiritual teachers say something that makes me laugh a little bit, that as humans, we want change. Everyone wants change, and we're also terrified of change. I can tell you that is absolutely true of me. I see it in myself. Um, so in any case, this year, and this is, as you'll see as I begin to break down the year more, it has to do with the very interesting movement back and forth with some of the planets that move the slowest. So when they change signs, it's a really big deal collectively. That's happening with a couple of the outer planets in a big way. And then also with the north, the nodes and Jupiter. So that's also a very important thing to look at in the larger field of the astrological currents. So yeah, there's a lot of shifting back and forth, changing. So if you want to, as I'm speaking, it is January 21st. And so if you want to think about some of the movements that were happening about a week ago, where we had Mars was stationing direct, Mercury was still retrograde. There was just a lot of kind of like this back and forth energy. Well, there is going to be that kind of dynamic and with different kind of flavors. So, all right, but the deeper theme that I really have been seeing, feeling that's an invitation for us now for is that we brighten, we lighten, we find our wings. That this is the year of emergence, and that's the frequency that I'm really working most powerfully with. And again, there's the emergence, and all of this is a spiral, right? So, um, and one of the examples I keep seeing and feeling is if we look back once again at this last fall, we have, if you follow, the sun, the sign, the sun moves into the different seasons. We have the Scorpio season, that happens in the late fall. And that's very deep. That's a down and deep kind of work of shadow work, of facing the depths in ourselves, of it's very inward. It's, very powerful feminine mysteries of the down and in kind of the facing the dark and doing these kind of death birth cycles. So it's really deep. So then we have following that Sagittarius. And then you have this kind of brightening experience. It's a spiritual, it's like the light and the darkness that comes through. So there's more of that expansive quality. Then once again, you go into Capricorn, and Capricorn is again, it's different, but it's a grounding, rooting. I've been seeing it so much like a big, great oak tree or a great tree of, that you would resonate with. It's a very big, abundant, it offers its fruit, its body to the whole family of life around it, but it's deeply rooted and grounded and sustaining. That's Capricorn, but it's very, again, there's this depth, there's the rooting, the grounding, the centering energy of that. And then today we have this new moon in Aquarius. So then we're moving into this more expansive period, right? So it's all dynamic, and when you can divide it up according to little micro movements. So the moon moving every 2.5 days from one sign to the next, if we follow the moon signs. So again, you can see this happening from the day-to-day moment. And then you can move out to the sun. The sun changes signs about every 30 days. And so there's a bit of a larger movement. And then you can go all the way out to a planet like Pluto, and it changes sign about every 248. I'm sorry, it changes sign. It's different because of its orbit. But in this case, we're going to have over 2 decades when Pluto moves into Aquarius this year, because that's part of what I'm hinting at. That's one of the big movements, that it's going to remain in that sign for about until 2043. So that's a movement. And this is also part of why I say we're emerging as a collective, because this is one of the energies that we're seeing incoming that kind of holds a different frequency as for the collective, even with the small micro movements always happening under the surface. I hope that makes sense. Okay. All right. Enough of that kind of opening. Now I'm going to invite us to kind of tap into some of the specifics of this year. So the first thing I do share actually here, and I'm going to end with it as well, is the Great American Annular Eclipse. Annular eclipse meaning annular is when it's that ring of fire eclipse where the moon is slightly smaller than the sun when they meet. And so there's this phenomena where you see that ring of fire. It's a beautiful thing to see. And when you can see things visibly, you can tune in with your body to what that's about, for you. But one of the big events, I think, and actually one of the big frames I like to work with, is to speak into, because I am in the US, and I certainly don't want to just talk about the experience in the US. I would say almost everything I'm talking about refers to the collective human species, right? This has to do with us dreaming into collectively, by using the currents of astrology, what's coming and how we might most productively work with that. At the same time, I continue to feel, because of a certain eclipse pattern, because of Pluto return for the US, because of certain prophecies that are really highlighting, indigenous prophecies that really highlight the Americas, I continue to think that Turtle Island, which is, one way of looking at the Americas, particularly North America, and or Abya Yala, which is, excuse me, a way of looking at North and South America together. My feeling is that as we are here really at the heart, literally at the heart of this deathing, birthing of an age, that the years 2017 to 2024 are in the crucible for the Americas, excuse me, and really especially the US in terms of the kind of deep transformational change that's happening under the surface and that we're invited to be a part of. Because what happens here, even with all the shifting politically and the power dynamics shifting very much across the globe, even with that, the US continues to be a massive influence across the planet. And I'm not just talking about what we can see in 3D, but I'm speaking spiritually, that our evolution and our maturation as here in the Americas, and specifically, I don't want to be married to nation states. We need to move beyond this. This is why I say Turtle Island reborn. But I do think that the roots of even the US, even with the deep patterning of the deep and powerful shadow of this nation, that at the root there was the potential, speaking Aquarius right now, there was the potential for a society that was very progressive. And I say progressive meaning that there were values to help us evolve as a species. So we have by no means met that challenge collectively. But again, I continue to feel that this is the time where it is for us to face our shadow here in the US, and it is for us to open into the spiritual awakening that potentially is happening, so we can become a blessing to the rest of the earth. And even as I say that, I'm very aware that what that means is part of that blessing again is to actually step out of the place. The old story. So the old story was kind of a savior rescuer story that actually has resulted in many bloody conflicts, among other things. But then to shift from that into a narrative of what is the original potential? What's the spiritual blueprint of this nation? And I like to go back to the reality that this nation and its original imprint had as an influence the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois Confederacy, and their governing system. And so there was the potential, and I feel there still is the potential as we dip into that, to have created a nation that is informed by indigenous wisdom and principles, like really considering how our actions impact the next 7 generations, as well as dipping into the root of the wisdom of the original peoples here, and connecting to the land and having ourselves become a model for how it is that we can be in right relationship with the land itself. So again, this is pretty lofty, right? But my feeling, again, when I see these eclipses, and again, 2017, there was the Great American Eclipse that went through the US, just bisected it. We've got this one happening in October, and then we'll have another one happening in April of 2024. And this is part of why I would say 2017 to 2024 is the crucible. Well, there's many reasons why that's so for us as a collective, but that's why I would say here in the US, and in the Americas, we're kind of in the hot seat in terms of needing to wake up and I would say allow ourselves to become conduits for a new consciousness. And again, I feel part of it is a big piece of it is reweaving our intelligence, our consciousness with that of the earth. And what's interesting, of course, about that is that there are many people, especially in the global south and all across the globe, in fact, who still remember that. But the reality is that it's for us to remember that here, because then it can get transmitted far faster. So here we go. That's my thought. All right. So that's where I show this image first. I wanted to tune into that. But just to give the events, so the big overview quickly, and then we'll dive into each one in turn. So the big thing this year is, again, that Pluto moves into Aquarius. It's going to be dipping in and out of the sign of Aquarius this year, and that's going to be, I'll talk more about the specifics of that. But again, it's going to be in Aquarius for about 20 years after that. And so we haven't had Pluto in Aquarius since 1777 is when it last moved into Aquarius. So that, that period of time, 77, and I have the dates here in a second, but for about 2 decades after that was the last time Pluto was in Aquarius. Because again, it's got a 248-year cycle. It takes that long to return to its original point. So because of that, what was happening in 1777 in the next couple decades after that was the French Revolution, the American Revolution. So these were the big events, and so you can get a tone for, massive uprising, an awakening, a spiritual consciousness, a shift and a change and a recognition that things need to change. And so there was this rising of the energy and a breaking free from the old constraints and old paradigms. So this is what we're moving into. What's our version of that? That's the question that we can all tune into. And, I was taught that we inform the mysteries as much as they inform us. And so when we know these currents, then that's the opportunity. That gives us the ability to very powerfully work with these mysteries, with these larger energetic currents that are in the field. It doesn't just happen to us. This is a time where it's for us. People are waking up very rapidly, despite what you would believe if you just look at the outer circumstances. If you just, listen to the news, or you're missing it. You're missing what's actually happening under the surface. So in any case, Pluto's moving into Aquarius again, brightening, lightening. And let me tell you, I'm not saying there's no shadow. There certainly is, but there's a cracking open, there's a shifting in a big way. Then Saturn is moving into Pisces, and Saturn changes sign every 30 years, versus about 30 years versus 248, right? But still, it's a big deal when Saturn moves into Pisces, which according to traditional astrology is the last sign of the zodiac. So when whatever Saturn's doing is a big deal because it impacts 3D reality. It has to do with how we navigate the material realm. And it has to do with constriction, and it has to do with bringing something into materiality, bringing it into form. So when Saturn moves into a new sign, it's really a big deal. But when it moves into the last sign of the zodiac, well, that's a big deal. It shifts it signifies that we're really ending something over the next 2.5 years. That's about how long it takes for Saturn to move through a sign. That we're also in an ending. We're in this ending process. So we're still in the threshold. We're still in the between, right? But there's and I find that to be grace filled. I like the fact that we have this integration time personally. But anyway, yeah, so Saturn's moving into Pisces. That's a big deal too. And then Jupiter is moving into Taurus. And then we have the lunar nodes moving into Aries, Libra. So this is one of the most fascinating movements of this year. And it's like when I speak of it, think about it every time I do an individual reading where I talk about the energies that are coming in. It's just fascinating. It's like this trade-off that's happening. And I've never seen anything like this before. But before I even speak to that, I'll just say, Jupiter, and when I look even at an individual chart, or if I look at what's happening for us in the collective, I almost always, if I were just to speak very quickly and simply to you, and I had almost no time to talk about what was important, I would go to Jupiter and the nodes. The reason for that is because the Jupiter signifies, it's traditionally seen as a benefic, but it has to do with our dharmic path. So if we're going to be lined up spiritually, if we're really on course, then we're following the directives of Jupiter, whatever sign it's in collectively or where it's showing up in our own chart. And so it helps us take the high road, you could say, in a sense. And then the lunar nodes, if you follow the directives of the north node, that is also very similarly, it's pointing us true north. And it's also helping us realign. It's a very interesting thing. It helps us kind of refine, realign. It opens doors for us. It helps us open into new things. It opens new opportunities. So Jupiter and the North Node both are helping us to find our way forward and some pretty tricky, interesting energies. So I'm going to talk about how they're doing a trade-off. One's moving into one sign, the other's moving into the other, and they're kind of passing, right? So okay, and then we have the Venus, and for anybody who really follows my work, you'll know that I have a deep devotion to the planet Venus. I've been working with her mysteries since 2010 very intensively. I've done a tremendous amount of research into the way her cycle works for people individually. Excuse me. That was interesting timing. Um, and through Venus Alchemy with Kaylin Castell, and I'm now in a phase of really creating my own programs working with Venus as I've stepped out of Venus Alchemy in an active role. So, but what's really powerful about this year, and again, there's just this is a very special year. What's happening? It feels magical. It feels precise. It feels like there's a precision to the way things are moving. There's a special magic to it. So the first half of the year, Venus is evening star in the sign of Cap and in her larger Venus Capricorn cycle. So she's in the last phase of her Capricorn cycle, which is about a year and a half long cycle for the first half of the year. So she's in the evening sky and she's doing her dance and she's bringing the Capricorn feminine medicine into the world in a powerful way. She's helping us ground and center even through all these other kind of crazy energies. And then we get to August, well, August 19th is a little more than, the first 6 months, but then you've got Venus rising as morning star in the sign of Leo, and that begins a new Leo Venus cycle. So this is really, powerful. We've got the Capricorn goddess on the world stage from the view of this way of looking at the Venus cycle. And then we have the Leo goddess. And when I say the goddess, I mean, whether you're male, female, non-binary, the feminine is, well, if I say three things, just focus on three things in the personal chart or in the collective, I would say North Node, Jupiter, and Venus, because we know that the feminine is rising at this time to balance the masculine principle that's been doing a lot of more work than he needs to do. She's needing to come forward. So we need to take her directive and let her lead. So the masculine can be backup, the masculine can support, but the feminine needs to lead. So follow what Venus is doing. So Venus and Leo and Capricorn as her overriding cycles. That's a big deal. And they're both strong feminine leaders. So there is this really, again, this strong emergence of the feminine leadership model. And I think we're coming to a place where we're beginning to recognize that one of the deep gifts of the feminine is she is inclusive. So she's not, it's about relationship for the feminine, whatever her archetype. And I disagree a little bit with my teachers with this, but I think about forging reconnection. The feminine is inclusive and she's reconnecting. She sees the whole. She wants to restore balance to the whole. And then the masculine is supporting her and taking action towards, and she's directing the masculine in the ways that are needed because she can see the big picture. And then the masculine is in service to that big picture. And again, not talking just about men, women, I'm talking about the masculine feminine principle. So, all right, so that's really powerful and exciting. And then we have Mars, and I'm really excited about this because I adore Mars. I'm actually, in a way, in traditional astrology, I am Mars ruled. I was born on a Tuesday. I think the older I get, to be honest, I think more of this Mars energy is going to be coming out. So I have to let myself kind of fall in love with what is the evolutionary, emergent energy of the sacred masculine as embodied by Mars. And I think what's exciting is that we've begun a new Mars cycle. And from the shamanic astrology frame, Mars begins a cycle when it's opposite the sun, and that happened December 8th, 2022. So it's about a 2 year and 2 month cycle, and it's in the sign of Gemini. So this is, this Gemini Mars cycle is introducing into the collective a masculine principle that is not bound by old rules. It's the masculine who actually is dipping us down into a more primordial masculine that is able to change, able to adapt, able to shape shift, and I feel even at its deepest root, to reconnect and reweave again with earth intelligence in its many forms, its plurality of forms, and also honor the human archetypes in their multiple forms, and be able to help us to break out of these crystallized or rigid ways of operating. So Mars in Gemini is part of the force that is with us, that's helping us to, again, to adapt and change. and to actually enjoy the process of letting go of the old form so we can step into something new and then shift and change as is required. So that's the Gemini Mars cycle. And so I'll talk more about that. And then we have the Mercury Earth year. So from the frame of shamanic astrology, we have Mercury when it stations direct at the end of its 3-year retrograde. That's when it's in a particular sign, and we see that as the sign that it's going to be guiding until the next retrograde cycle, the end of the next retrograde cycle when it stations direct again. So from that angle, we've got 4 Mercury retrograde cycles, and then that each time it goes direct is in an earth sign. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So I think that again, that's even with all the shifts and changes, even with the lightening, the brightening, we're letting the light in because we've been doing so much deep emotional healing, clearing work. We've been healing densities so we can let in more light. Our minds are still, in a sense, helping us to continue to connect to the consciousness of Earth, and it's keeping us somewhat stabilized through all these changes in our consciousness. And I see that as a good thing. I see that as a balancing thing. All right, and then we have one of the most spectacular events, I think, this year, which is summer solstice featuring, this is amazing. So the Venus cycle, the way that I use the Venus cycle, and I've done this with Kaylin Castell through Venus Alchemy, and came from Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, which is now the Turning of the Ages Mystery School, just to give a full background. That we see Venus and her cycle as it's basically the Sumerians, and their stories of Inanna are at the deepest root of the Western European traditions and the first written accounts. And so they're the story of this goddess Inanna who descends to the underworld. She goes through a death birth process and she comes out. And on the way down and up, she goes through these gates and she lets go of all of her adornments, everything that makes her queen, everything that gives her an identity. She's got to strip it all away, go into the underworld, face her dark sister, her other half, her shadow, and go through this massive death birth process and be purified and refined, and then be initiated, and then go through the gates again and restore herself and reclaim her true initiated goddess self. So through this frame, it's always exciting in the Venus cycle when she completes the cycle, and when the goddess, it's at the 7th time that the Venus comes together with the moon in the evening star cycle, and this happens every 1.5 years, that she gets her crown. That's the 7th time. So that's Inanna, the goddess. She gets her crown back at the 7th gate. She starts at the root all the way up to the crown. So this is a really powerful moment. It's so powerful that when I started working with women in the cycle, I could see literally the women for whom the cycle was personal. It's their return. One woman got pregnant when Venus was in the underworld. She literally had her baby crown the day Venus was with the crown. Another woman literally got the keys to her house on that day. There were so many so I started, if for some people, I will literally say, work with the Venus moon gates to manifest. And so in any case, that is a very powerful time when Venus and the moon come together. But not only will they come together, and it's at the summer solstice that it happens, which is just incredibly beautiful and powerful. But not only that, it's happening with Mars. So Mars, Venus, and the moon all meet up at the summer solstice, visible in the sky with the moon. So it's going to be just beautiful. And I highly recommend, and I myself am currently looking at what kind of in-person event I can be hosting, facilitating, or co-facilitating at that time, and where. So I'm really excited about that. And I think it has to do with another theme that's been ongoing for the last few years, which is about sacred union. It's the sacred masculine, the sacred feminine coming together in Leo at the crown chakra. How do the masculine and feminine both restore a sense of really original, like really powerful, radiant self-love and self-acknowledging, and with holding it with the other, masculine, feminine coming together and going through this gate. It's just very, very powerful. So that's another big event. And then again, we've got the eclipse. So I've already spoken into the most important frequencies and energies. But I'll say, so even if you wanted to end there, I'd be like, okay, I got my dose. I think you will have gotten some good insight. But for those who want to go deeper, all right, let's start at the beginning. So again, Pluto moved into Aquarius. It's going to be moving into Aquarius this year. So March 23rd is when when Pluto moves from Capricorn for the first time into Aquarius. Now, excuse me, this is where interesting that the sneezing. I guess it's a releasing, right? This happens sometimes. But basically, I've talked about this all the time, but I'll repeat it here because it bears repeating that that Pluto has been in the sign of Capricorn since 2008. And so since that time, whatever sign Pluto moves through, it's this composting, death birthing, it's deep transformation. You must face the shadow. You've got to really be, it's really like mowing through whatever that sign is, activating it, it energizes it. And it also acts as this, again, it forces to the surface what's been in shadow, and it forces this deathing, birthing process. And so Capricorn, then Pluto moving into has been in Capricorn. Capricorn is very much like the planet Saturn. It's all things 3D. It has to do with human societal institutions and frameworks. It has to do with how we govern ourselves collectively. It has to do with medical, economic, political, educational, all of the infrastructure, all the institutions that we use to govern ourselves as human beings, as a collective, have all been in this massive kind of just composting, deathing, birthing. They're just, the old forms are crumbling, the old forms are falling, not working. And so what we can't see yet, but what Aquarius, the Pluto and Aquarius cycle has the potential to offer for us, is to begin to really see these new emergent systems that are arising and to energize and empower those. But the old structures and forms have had to go first. So this year, next year are the years when there's a back and forth movement between Aquarius, Capricorn, and we're feeling that internally. I think and so to have some patience and love and compassion, and also maybe humor about this way that, one day I'm my new identity, and we'll see this a lot in coaching, like culture and transformational kinds of contexts. It's like, and I'm certainly experiencing it. It's like, who's this new me? Who do I want to be? Who is the identity of me as it needs to arise, so that I can really fully offer my gifts in this world, so that I can let go of the old patterns and conditioning that holds me back from fully expressing myself here, giving my gifts, making my offering, living my calling. There's who's that new me that needs to emerge. And it's, like the butterfly from the chrysalis, caterpillar, butterfly are very different beings. So how does that kind of metamorphosis work? And so one moment to the next, though, you might kind of be like, wait, am I caterpillaring or am I butterflying? Am I caterpillaring, but am I in the cocoon? Am I not? So again, this kind of sense of there's a back and forth movement, expansion, contraction, birthing process that we've been in, but there's even a bigger, deeper layer of that now. So yeah, so there's Pluto. So Pluto's been in Capricorn. And again, just to give it an even deeper frame, 2008, Pluto moved into Capricorn. And then after that period, we had in this acceleration of that process that began really in 2019 as the South Node was in Capricorn, but then 2020, Jupiter, Saturn, both also moved into Capricorn. So all three of those celestial beings were activating Pluto and moving through Capricorn. And so they've been this deeper process of breaking down the old order, and this isn't just outer institutions, mind you, it also has to do with our narratives, our stories about what's true, about what works. It's what works in 3D, what works in consensus reality. All of that has had to, have all been in this personal process of having to let go of the old cultural conditioning, the old beliefs around what works and what doesn't. in our personal lives, in the way we manage and navigate and govern ourselves, our bodies, our time, our energy, our resources, and in the way that we do those things collectively. That's been in a deep, deep transformational process. And boy, it has not been comfortable many times, but also there have been these pieces of like, thank goodness, this is much needed. So now we've got, and then the last piece of the Capricorn crucible that I thought was so elegant was, and no, two things. One is there's the Pluto return for the US. So once again, what I mentioned in the beginning, that just so happens that Pluto, that the US, when the US was founded, Pluto was at 27 degrees Capricorn, the latest degrees of Capricorn. And so from 2021, really ostensibly until 2024, 2023, Pluto really is activating. It's coming back around within very close to the Pluto in the US birth chart. So it's a Pluto return for this nation. And so again, we're in the crosshairs. So the deeper restructuring, death birthing of our systems and institutions, including our economic, which still has a tremendous influence on the rest of the world, is being it is being worked, it's being composted, and we're a part of that process, each of us collectively and personally. So in any case, that's the first. And then the second that I find very elegant is that Venus, the goddess herself, has been in a death birth process as the Capricorn goddess, because she began a new 1.5 year Venus and Capricorn cycle in January of last year, 2022, that now completes in August of this year, 2023. So Venus has been in this Capricorn cycle. And when Venus is in a particular cycle, whatever that face of the goddess, Capricorn, that's the version of the goddess who's on the world stage. She's the wise elder, the matriarch, the wise grandmother. She's the female model for how it is that we govern, we care for each other, we create a new form of community. So she's the one on the world stage. And so there's that goddess form, but then there's also this deeper process where she's helping us, like Inanna, collectively continue to strip away very elegantly through each of the chakra moon gates, whatever distortions we continue to have when it comes to, our internal patriarchy, because really this is what's being dismantled through Capricorn, dismantling the patriarchy internally. And if you want to pause to think about that, it's like, whatever you are so upset about or concerned about, when we look in every direction of the politics, of the healthcare system, all of that, there is a necessary falling away with all of that externally, but also there's something happening inside of us. Also, think about healthcare. Like, how am I viewing my own body, my physicality, my health? How am I becoming more integrated in the way that I care for that? How are the old ways of caring for my body no longer working for me? We can ask that question. If it has to do with politics, my way of interacting with other humans and really having boundaries and being authentic and genuine and negotiating, all of those qualities internally, person to person, those are under fire. So what's not working for me, and how does that need to be expressed differently? And how is it that these old ways are really just not working and it's so obvious? And so on and so forth. You get it, right? How I work with money, how I'm actually educating myself or learning. So we can look all we want out there at those systems, but the deep change has to also happen internally. And I'm really, always most interested in that too. I think that's where we have a tremendous amount of power. And I also think that all the shifting and changing that's happening within each human soul and life and experience that's where the transformation's happening. And that's why I encourage people not to just believe the news. Yes, look at homeopathic dose of what's going on in the world and understand a lot. Look beneath the surface, do your research, look at what's happening out there. Yes, tune into it. And also recognize there's so much we're not seeing and hearing that is happening under the surface, and we're just going to be seeing and hearing it more and more and more. Okay, that's my little preach. All right. Okay, then we also have Saturn, which has been in the sign of Aquarius since winter solstice 2020, and that beautiful kind of light at the end of the tunnel event. If you recall, if you followed these astronomical, astrological events, at the end of um, the maelstrom that was 2020, we saw Saturn and Jupiter meet after having moved through Capricorn and met up with Pluto. They met at the winter solstice in the sign of Aquarius. That was a big deal. That was indicating, at least you could say, a 20, if not a 200-year new cycle moving from Capricorn to Aquarius. Because when those two planets come together in a sign, again, it's an indication there's a new kind of order. There's something new that's happening in our material, our human societal structures. But this is a rebuilding. This is an opening to something new. So that was already beginning. We're already beginning to feel that at that time. And some would say that's the age of Aquarius, that we're really moving into that at this time. That's a whole larger discussion, but suffice it to say that even at that time, there was a beginning of a shift from this more dense, earthy orientation into Aquarian. So that's been something that's been unfolding under the surface ever since. Okay, so then the last time Saturn was in Pisces was May 1993 to April 1996. I'm not going to go into great detail about this, but I find it very hopeful. I think people will say negative things about Saturn and Pisces. I actually think that there were a lot of things happening back in those years, 1993 to 96, but one of the big ones was Uranus and Neptune coming together. And they were conjunct at that time. And so there was this really powerful spiritual awakening happening at that time. But again, I feel that Saturn in Pisces was also helping to hold the container for that magic. And some of the things that I remember when I was having my own kind of spiritual awakening back in 2001, 2002, when I was in grad school, I was devastated, feeling like we as a human species that we were absolutely killing the earth. It was the first time that I was introduced. It was the first time I actually felt that it was possible that the human species could annihilate ourselves or the earth. Like, I was always an optimist, and there was this moment, this dark night of the soul, in terms of my view of humanity and of what we were doing to the earth, where I had a very sobering experience that there were no guarantees. That was my kind of wake up call. And at that time, what happened, so a lot of people are there now, and I'm really aware of that. And so I always want to help people, yes, face that deep grief for what we've done, face that deep grief for what we've done to the earth and the other species. But what woke up for me at that time was I started reading people who were writing and bringing forward different ideas during this period, 93 to 96. And those were permaculture designers. People were talking about permaculture and the way that humans could actually engage with the earth in a way that was beneficial to other species, that could rebuild soils, that could, it was like helping us remember how to be gardeners of the earth. That was radical. It was exciting. I was learning about eco villages, how humans could create entire communities that actually gave back more to the earth. I started learning about deep ecology and the people like Joanna Macy and others who were helping us to, at a collective level, to really grieve and to really process what we've been doing, and to become more conscious and more ensouled in our journey as a species. So that was all kind of arising at that time. And I feel like Saturn in Pisces was helping us kind of mature and move into deeper compassion and create a container in which a lot of magic could happen. And that's how I'm seeing Saturn in Pisces. If you want magic, you need some form of structure or form to hold it. And Pisces has to do with this unity consciousness, has to do with us really opening into our hearts beyond just those who look like us. And I think opening our hearts beyond the human species into this greater family of life here on the planet and in the cosmos. So Saturn in Pisces is that's starting March 7th. It's going to go until February 2026. So there's a big shift, and also this deeper current of like a feeling of an ending, a completion. So you could say Saturn in Pisces is also helping us to smooth the way, or supporting us again from this Pluto and Capricorn and the Capricorn crucible, helping us have the needed compassion, the empathy, the opened hearts to ground us in love and ground us in the spirit principles of love and of compassion and empathy as we begin to move into this Pluto and Aquarius phase, that it is shadow can be a time where mostly what's energized is new consciousness and new states of mind. My sense is that it's very beneficial that the great heart of the goddess, which is Pisces, is opened within us in this portal. So that I'm going to leave that there. Okay. Jupiter in Aries and Taurus. And I almost could have made one slide with Jupiter and the nodes on the same slide, because it's important to see that, again, there's a back and forth movement that I mentioned before. So Jupiter has been in Aries. It moved into Aries last year, 2022, May 10th. And it was there until December 28th. And then it moved back into Pisces. I didn't write that here because I think we can get really complicated. But in that time from May of last year, 2022, until October, that was a moment where we all can kind of tune back in and feel into that Jupiter and Aries pulse. And that was very much about, it's a beginning movement of asking, well, what am I really here for? What's my calling? Aries wants a calling. Aries wants a mission. It's like, I came into this form. I'm here. It's like a 2-year-old. Like, I'm here. What's my job? What am I going to do? I want to pour my whole self into being here. I want to say a big, holy yes to life. That's the beauty of powerful, healthy Aries. I want to forge a path that no one's forged before. I want to be me. I just want to shine as who I am. And I don't want to be fettered. I want to move and take action before my doubting mind or my survival sympathetic system blocks me and holds me back and keeps me in the old fear program. So Aries is that really courageous, heart-centered part of us, I see, that's got a yes to moving forward into this new era, this new earth consciousness. So you might have felt the seeds in that time period of, oh, there's these glimmerings. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to forge ahead. And then back into Pisces. So maybe some grief process. Pisces can be about loss and what do I need to let go of? And then moving back into Aries. So we've got Jupiter in Aries from December 20th, I believe, of 2022 until May 16th. And so I see this as a really beautiful thing, like really, move forward and take risks and take actions and try new things and create projects and mess around and then reflect on what you did. But don't just stay home and stay safe, like try new things. And if you feel a yes in your body and a calling, just go for it. This is some of the greatest protection. If you're afraid of the change in the world, get involved, get engaged, get your hands dirty. This is a good time for that. It's actually essential because there's something only you can bring into the world. And when I say bring into the world, I want to say, yeah, some of us are more introverted. I mean, I'm here, right? I'm in front of my computer at my house, right? But I still am making things happen. I'm doing things. And there is also, I think, for many of us, the desire to do more in our own local communities. And that is definitely coming alive for me as well. Pluto and Aquarius, there's the concern that as we move even further into this Aquarius age, that a very real concern that the way we've now been become, especially our young ones, more and more adapted to all this time in front of the screen. What is this doing to us? This is not something that no one's ever talked about. But really, how do we stay human? And we've created these technologies, right? Arguably. But how do we stay human and use the technologies to serve a new consciousness, a new way of being on the earth that really reverences the great mother, that reverences the earth, that reverences human communities, that honors the dimension of soul, that resacralizes the human society, brings the sacred back in a way that is that causes us to, again, care for each other and the earth, very simply. So, gosh, where was I going with that? Okay, so we've got Jupiter in Aries. Yeah, that's moving in into May 16th. And then we have, this is really fun, Jupiter in Taurus. That is, so Jupiter is going to start to move through the sign of Taurus. Now we've had a lot going on in the sign of Taurus over the last few years as well, because we've had Uranus in Taurus. Oh gosh, and now I'm not remembering exactly the year that it moved in. It was a few years back. But Uranus has been in Taurus, and the sign of Taurus is all about it's earthy, it's about pleasure, it's about receiving, it's about the material. So the shadow side of Taurus is the part of us that is maybe wanting to use the accumulation of wealth or the physical or the material in a way that maybe is trying to, make up for a lack of the spiritual connection. That's the shadow side of it. But my sense is that really the Taurus medicine we need very much as a society. And one of the ways I think of this that I find really useful is this idea. There are some spiritual teachers will say that at some stage in our evolution as a species, as human as species, that we used to be we have the evidence to show that there were very peaceful human societies before this one and some others that were more more violent and more harmful to the earth, but that there were other many societies, and the majority of time as humans we have been more peaceful, we have been more harmonious with the earth. And some would say it's because there was this orientation built into the society of a focus on creating beauty, on creativity, and how can we live well? How can we enjoy being in a physical body? How can there's more celebratory of sexuality? Um, you know, culture's rich in creating different forms of theater and art. Like we look at ancient Crete, for example, um, or you can look at any indigenous society and the kinds of ornate clothing that they make and the kinds of dance and the kind of the beauty that emerges from an intact society and culture, that we as humans have had that, you know, far more longer than this society we live in now that is emerged from the age of patriarchy or separation from the earth, and an imbalance between masculine and feminine, that some would say that we were more pleasure oriented, and that's how we created our societies, was to create something that felt good. Our communities felt good, our societies, they were anchored into pleasure and being embodied and enjoying this earth life, but that something happened and then literally our genes were tampered with, so that that pleasure gene was turned off and something instead was turned on that would orient us more to survival and to being motivated by pain and being motivated by suffering and a feeling of scarcity and lack, and that something got shifted in us. So I find that frame useful, whether it's true or not. I find it useful on the level that to me, it does feel like, with more and more of us doing, I have an embodiment practice now that I try to devote myself to most days on some level. And that the more we come back home into our bodies, that we're able to heal in tremendous ways. And that's also going to support us in coming back home to the earth. And Taurus helps us do that. So I don't think it's any accident that at the same time, all these old earth ways of orienting through the Capricorn crucible is happening, then we have Uranus in Taurus helping us wake up once again, maybe light up those DNA that were shut down, light up the pleasure gene, help us to remember, oh my God, being in a body feels good. Oh my God, like we're sensual beings. I see the sunrise and the sunset and I feel it. I eat this delicious organic meal and I go to the farmer's market and I feel connected again to this living, thriving, alive, sensual world, right? I see that as a very positive thing. And then the North Node moved into Taurus um, last year. Uh, and and then it came together with Uranus. So they both lit up this field and helped us wake up to that original knowing. And now you have Jupiter is going to be moving into Taurus. So amplifying, making bigger. Jupiter makes everything it touches bigger. So after all the other Uranus work we've been doing, Jupiter is moving into that sign, and it will be until May 25th, 2024. Right after that final eclipse that's so potent during this series of eclipses across the Americas. So again, this invitation into embodiment, into experience of loving this earth so much that that's where our activism comes from. That's where our the passion, the Aries passion to create something new, to get together with our communities and create new businesses that are ecologically oriented, to create, new systems of support that are honoring of the earth. Like it comes from love. It comes from love. All right. And so then we've got the lunar nodes. And again, there's the same energies of Aries, First of all, again, the North Node has been in Taurus, and I'm focusing on the North Node because I only have so much time, and it's good to focus on how we want to move forward. North Node has to do with that. So there's the Taurus North Node, and that began January 18th of 2022, and it goes until July of 2023. So this year it shifts into Aries, right? So like I said, North Node, so true North for humanity, has been helping us reorient to this world of the body, of the earth, as pleasure, as really savoring it and enjoying it and loving it, slowing down, more of the deep magnetic feminine as well as part of all that. And then we have the nodes moving into Aries Libra. So beginning July 18th, the North Node will move into Aries because they go backwards. They go the opposite direction as the planets. So from July 18th until January 11th, 2025, we're going to have this Aries Libra axis for the nodes, so that true north is Aries. And we've already had Jupiter moving through Aries, kind of expanding in part, perhaps helping us see the places where, with Jupiter and Aries, it's like we're trying all these new things, we're planting these new seeds, we're experimenting, we're trying new things. And then North Node comes through, and yes, there's still that move forward, try new things, have beginner's mind, say holy yes to everything that your soul lights up. And again, Aries is always get ahead of that doubting mind and do it. Just take action. There's power behind momentum, behind action and getting into momentum. But the way I see it with the North Node is that it's also a refining process. It's helping us kind of smooth those things out and learn from what hasn't worked, and to really get a little smoother in our course as we move into our soul's callings. I will just briefly also mention the South Node. The way I see the South Node is different than most. I actually think the gift of the South Node is it helps us go through all the layers, because it's going from the highest degrees in the sign to the 0 point. So from my perspective, for example, with the Taurus Scorpio lunar nodes, when the South Node moved into Scorpio, because when the North Node moves into Taurus, the South Node's in Scorpio. They're opposite. So when it hit 29 degrees Scorpio, and I was like, what's going on in 2022? What I've seen, and it has been emerging, it's been so visible, is healing the witch wound. Because Scorpio does have to do with the deepest feminine mysteries of the female shaman, of the male shaman as well, of those medicine carriers who have the capacity to go into the darkest places and transmute that into wholeness. And so, these are people of power. And so you see it all around us, people waking up with their abilities, their magical abilities, people really doing so much, that there's awakening of the feminine power on a level that's very deep and um, very transformational. So that's something that's been happening with the South Node in Scorpio. And now, but there's also the shadow, right? So the shadow side of Scorpio can be the part of us that is like trying to control and manage everything. That has actually, the shadow side of Scorpio can be to use your powerful will and your um, determination and your desire to really impact the world around you, to use that in such a way that you're manipulating things that aren't for you to manipulate. So if you see the shadow side of, we've been seeing it, the shadow side of people who are doing plant medicines or opening us up into these deeply transformational processes, but who don't have full integrity. And so, it creates a space for distortion, too much control. How do we use our power, basically, is the question. So it's not just people out there. I think many of us, as I step into my personal power, as I influence others, I'm really aware the shadow Scorpio side that has to do with, how is it that I can be in deep integrity such that I remain really rooted in my heart when I'm serving others, and have a strong spiritual practice, so that I'm surrendering my ego desire to feel important, to really serving the whole and serving the good of the whole from my high heart. So that all is part of what I think is important to acknowledge. I've got the dragon here because the nodes have to do with the path of the sun and the moon and where they intersect. The moon's always doing this movement with the sun like on a line, and the ancient in Asia, in China, in the Vedic societies of India and that region, they really paid a lot of attention to the nodes, and they called them the head of the dragon was the north, where the orbit of the sun moon is above the sun's line, and the south, the tail of the dragon, is where it's below. So in any case, that's the reason for those images. But I think this Jupiter north south node kind of handoff, if you just bring it down to the level of we've got this Aries and Taurus medicine that supports us moving through 2023 with all the shifts and changes and all that we're moving through. There's again the Aries desire to say yes, try new things, find your calling, move into the world, don't be a perfectionist, make things happen. And then there's Taurus that's also saying, and let it be coming from a place of deep love for the earth and for this experience of being fully in the body, bringing the soul back into the body, so that as we take action, we're embodied. And when we're embodied and when we are in our place of love and gratitude for our bodies in this earth, then our actions are going to tend to be well placed. All right, and I talked about this before, but I'll talk a little more about it, that we have been, again, in this Venus and Capricorn cycle since January, close to the time that North Node moved into Taurus. About January 12th, 2022, last year, Venus began a Capricorn cycle. It's 1.5-year cycle. And so since that time, there's been this dismantling of it's another layer of that deathing, birthing of societal structures externally, and also dismantling of the inner patriarch, like the part of us that, so just to back up for a second, when I think of patriarchy, or when I think of the last 5,000 years that we're moving out of, what I think the original wound has been initially was, well, you could say separation. We separated ourselves. There was a path where we've separated ourselves from the matrix of the earth, of matter, of the mother. So it's an age of separation where we have became quite mechanistic. So that worldview that humanity adapted that informs our systems is as if it's a dead, inert universe, as if it's not alive, but our ancestors knew it was alive. So this has been very nightmarish, and it's a dark age, according to the yugas of the Indian sages. They would say we're in a dark age and we're just beginning to come out of it. That it's kind of it's an aberration for humanity to actually believe that this is just dead matter, and that we are dead matter, that we're soulless. So we're coming out of this phase, and so what's the original wound? Well, you could say it's that separation from source. You could say that in this society, what Gabor Mate would say, is that that's mirrored in what happens to most babies, most children, most of us in this society, is that well-meaning parents and all of the institutions around us have a function of literally separating us from our original essence and from our inner knowing and wisdom and our connection to the larger natural world. And so we are personally and collectively, again, reweaving, reconnecting to source, reconnecting to core wisdom, reconnecting into the wisdom of the body. And so the Venus and Capricorn cycle has helped us let go of those places and probably first meet those areas in our lives in a more personal way, where we were maybe coming from a place of separation from our own hearts, separation from our own bodies, separation from each other. A feeling of isolation, alienation, separation has been the deepest wound. And, and this disconnect from other human beings has been very painful for many people as well. So my hope is that we are coming back into deeper communion with our own souls and with each other. And Venus in Capricorn has been helping us to let go of those old patterns. Okay. And then again, we have Venus, Leo, morning star beginning August 19th, right around that time. Venus rises as morning star. And then for the rest of this year, 2023, Venus will be morning star. And I'm a morning star Venus person, so I love Venus morning star. She's so beautiful. And a Leo cycle, again, it's again part of this brighten, lighten, emerge dynamic. We're moving from Capricorn, which is more earthy, grounded, rooted, into Leo as the frequency, which is more about shine your light. But just understand the morning star phase of a cycle is where we're actually letting go of whatever stands in the way of a healthy relationship with that archetype. So again, part of what you might be seeing and feeling is that it's for us to let go of all the ways that we have been um, shining our light, dimming our light. And I am of the belief that, and I think I kind of am fascinated by people who've had near-death experiences, and Anina Morjani and Jerome Braggs are two that I follow. And what they would say is, and there's another woman who wrote the book, Amy Scher, who wrote the book, How to Heal Yourself When No One Else Can. All three of them would basically say that all disease stems from the places where we are dimming our light, where we're actually um, not allowing the soul to shine through. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And so I think what stands in the way of self-love, what stands in the way of owning and claiming the spirit inside of you, that's going to be the question with Venus and Leo Morningstar at a personal level. And at a collective, how do we let go of an orientation to superficial outer appearances? Like, this looks good on the outside, but it feels like crap on the inside. Um, how do we drop into greater authenticity and actual genuine self-love, which might not actually look the way you think it looks. It's what it feels like on the inside. So these are some of the themes that Venus is going to be bringing to us. Oh, and also Venus and Leo, again, the sovereign feminine leader. When I say sovereign, I mean women and men getting in touch with their feminine side, where that feminine presence that sees the whole and sees what needs to be done and knows how to be an inclusive leader is going to be rising. So we're going to see that in the second half of this year, and then also, or the last 3 quarters of the year. I keep saying last half, and then we're also going to be seeing it in 2024. So I feel very hopeful personally about that. And then again, as I'd mentioned, we've got this new Mars and Gemini cycle, and that's going to be going on for the next 2 years, really. And I find that to be very, very positive. Interestingly, when Venus begins her cycle, she's morning star. When Mars begins his cycle, he's evening star. So you've probably been seeing Mars, beautiful bright red Mars. And as I speak at the beginning of the year, he's in the sacred hoop of stars in the sky. He's been quite close to the Pleiades and Aldebaran, the Eye of the Bull. He's just stunning. But work with Mars, because Mars is going to help us because he's in this Gemini cycle. He's in the sign of Gemini until March 23rd or 22nd. He's been in the sign of Gemini since August of 2022. So there's this big Gemini energy, Mars energy, that's in the field, and it will continue to be, because again, the overtone of the cycle is set when it begins. So the sign of Gemini is really flavoring this entire Mars cycle. So the sacred masculine, again, is helping us learn how to adapt, learn how to shape shift as we need to through all these changes. And as a Gemini moon person, I'll tell you, like, I think that, from the shamanic astrology frame, your moon is what you have your deepest genius in. It's what you've spent lifetimes cultivating and mastering. So as a Gemini master, what I will say, one of my gifts and skills is, and I've come to really appreciate it, is that where other people might, if you're really solid and stable and everything must be this way, it's like you're going to get hit by so much change. I'm sorry to say, but it's true. What Gemini knows is, recently I was just traveling, my flight was canceled, I had to take a train. I just made a game of it. I had this ridiculous hat that I had bought that had these little like like bear ears. I was wearing my hat. I was waiting for the train for 2 dang hours. And yes, I was also frustrated. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, this is an adventure, and there were so many miracles that happened along the way. That's what happens. I like to share the story about how at one point when I was living here in Missouri, and I left for Isla Mujeres in the Yucatan. Yeah, it's outside of Cancun, one of my favorite places. And I flew there. And the day after I flew there, they had a huge ice storm here in Missouri. And then the day I flew back from Isla Mujeres, they'd had a huge hurricane and all this flooding. The whole town was flooded. So, I could look at it, well, I don't think I'm that powerful, right? But basically, I think that there's part of my spirit that's always a few steps ahead, because Gemini has a foot in the other world. Gemini has a very sensitively tuned nervous system and energetic system. So you're not so anchored in the human and the density and everybody else's rules. So you can you're light enough that you can kind of scout things out with your greater self and make choices based on that. There's so much more I could say about this, but I see Mars and Gemini as a blessing. It's an opportunity for us to become more magical and to live lives in more magical ways, step out of density, and see how we can really adapt and change. We can adapt and change. We can shift. We can grow. This is possible for us. We can do it. We're doing it. All right. And I talked again about the Mercury Earth year. So I've got some dates here. Basically, once again, when this date, January 18th, is when Mercury stationed direct in its last retrograde cycle. So that's when we began this Capricorn, because it was in the sign of Capricorn. So that's when we began a Capricorn cycle. And then until May 14th, when then it stations direct in Taurus. So how long is that? That's like January, February, March, April, May. It's like 4 months in a sign from this frame. There are lots of frames, but this is the one I'm using. And then May 14th, it's in Taurus until the September 15th. So 4 more months, and then Virgo. So as you can see, it's just like there are all these earth signs. The mind, Mercury consciousness is oriented to, is exploring, is traveling in. So we get to have our overstory, or the story that we're collectively telling, is infused with earth medicine. In the case of Capricorn, the way I'm seeing this is that I see it again as a big gift that we have Venus in Capricorn for the first 3 quarters of the year, I should say. And we have this Mercury in Capricorn overstory until May 14th. So there's just this grounding, rooting, because we've been clearing the distortions of Capricorn. So now we're getting into the good stuff. We're getting it again into that grand old oak tree, the part of us that's like, I'm rooted in the earth. I'm strong. I'm capable. When I'm me, when I'm rooted in my deepest wisdom of my ancestry, and we do want to connect with the whole healed ancestors. When I'm rooted in that, when I'm rooted in the land, when I'm making offerings, when I'm loving, when I'm connected to the grandmothers and the grandfathers and the elders and the land around me and the original indigenous intelligence, then, and I'm getting chills, then life is good. And I offer gifts to the whole universe just by being, right? That's healthy Capricorn. And then the next phase, May 14th, Taurus mind, Taurus overstory is, again, it's all about pleasure. It's that I see and feel and know. It's my way of processing information, thinking, speaking, is a love poem, is a love ode to, like, from the pleasure of being in a body and being on the earth. So it's beautiful. Okay. Oops, let me turn that off. So, all right. So then we have Virgo is the last one. And that's, so Virgo, again, that's beautiful too, because it's like the priestess or the earth mage that's helping us think as Gaia thinks. Okay. So, and I'm gonna, but basically there's actually 4 Mercury retrograde cycles in 2023. I say that's a gift. I think that's a blessing, but just want to speak to that. All right. And here we do, again, we've got March 1st. These are night sky events you might want to tune into. March 1st, Venus is with Jupiter in the sky. It's just a beautiful event, so don't miss that. June 21st, summer solstice. I've talked about that. August 13th are the Perseid meteor showers. Really beautiful because there's a new moon. And the Geminids are December 13th to 14th. Also really vivid because it's a new moon. And then again, once again, October 14th, the Great American Annular Eclipse. Just beautiful, stunning. See if you can be on the path, or at least tune in, even if you're not. And I'm seeing that as acupuncture points. The eclipse is activating this region and really the whole region to support us in, waking up. It's more of this waking up process. Okay, so I'm going to end it there. And I hope this has been helpful. And I'm just sending so much love in 2023 for each and every one of you. Again, Tammy Brunk, tammybrunk.com. You can tune into me. You can work with me. Go to work with me on my website. and schedule a reading or work more deeply with me. I'm so excited to be offering some programs. Womb to Wings is my newest 6-month container. And you'll be seeing more from me this year. But I hope you have a beautiful 2023 and so much love.